It's the weekend here on the All NBA show. So, what are people around the league talking about? Expansion and the Lakers, as well as anybody that is a threat to Oklahoma City. How long or short is that list? That's what we're talking about on today's edition of the All NBA show. What is up, everybody, and welcome to the All NBA show powered by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet at FanDuel.com/AllCity. I'm your host, Adam Mares, and I'm joined, as I always am on the weekends, by my esteemed colleague, Marc Stein from the Stein Line, as well as the DLLS Mavs podcast. Marc, how are you doing today? It's been a couple weeks. How have you been?
Adam Mares. Apologies in advance. My voice is still... Well, my voice is never good, but it's less than its usual capacity. So hopefully it will hold up. I'm still on the rebound, but the NBA does not stop for springtime illness.
No, it does not. You have to keep pushing and keep going forward, but it is a better time now than a month from now when the playoffs will be in full swing and the league is just going to be absolutely on fire. In fact, this is kind of a good week. I feel like we've had some really great weeks in the NBA, but with March Madness, it's almost like the schedule has adjusted downward just a little bit to make way for March Madness. I feel like that happens every year, that the league knows this weekend basketball kind of the focus is elsewhere.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I work with Amazon, and the week before we had 3 straight nights worth of games. And then now it's a long break until March 28th. So of course, March Madness does, every front office is lasered in on the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
Getting in-person looks at these guys. So there's no question that this, for league executives, that is the focus. But you also have to say this is going to be a big week coming up because the Board of Governors are scheduled to meet in New York. It's a little bit earlier than normal for their springtime meeting. And between expansion, NBA Europe, lottery reform, there's a lot on the agenda.
Well, let me ask you first about the Board of Governors meeting. This is an annual meeting. How often do they meet? Is it just the once a year that everybody gets together?
No, they meet in the spring. They meet during Summer League. They meet right before the season. So it's at least 3 times. Okay. And, they can also have virtual meetings when necessary. The competition committee meets separate from the Board of Governors meetings, but there's always a meeting in the spring this time of year. And expansion, we've gotten word that, look, what's going to happen this week is basically a vote to dive fully into expansion. And obviously that vote is going to get tons of support. Now, with the Knicks involved, I don't know that anything's going to be unanimous. So it might be 29-1 as opposed to 30 zip. But, this is not the actual vote to yay or nay expansion. This is just the vote basically that the league's going to full steam ahead, laser in on Vegas and Seattle as the 2 cities they're researching intently. So obviously that's going to, that vote is mostly, like I said, I can't ever predict a 30-0 shutout anymore because the Knicks like to vote no on everything. But it is going to get the go ahead, and the NBA is going to basically spend throughout, while the playoffs are going on, it's going to be a full-on look at, is expansion going to happen? And the expectation is that it will.
So I'm kind of interested in this idea that it could be 30-0 or 29-1 or 28-2, that it's very overwhelming support for this. Is it as simple as the fact that it just means more money for owners, and owners will always
to be clear, the vote will be that lopsided to go ahead with the full-on research.
Okay.
The vote, when they actually vote on, do we expand? If my math is right, the league needs 23 out of 30 teams to say yes. I think they will get it, but that vote is probably not going to be 29-1 or 28-2 because there are some teams. There's a belief that some owners are resistant to it. I do think at the end of the day, we're talking the estimates have been $7 to $10 billion per team in terms of expansion fee. So that's a lot of money to be coming in. And remember, expansion fees, that's not something that teams have to share with the players. Let's just say they get a full 10 billion each. That's 20 billion that 30 teams divide amongst themselves, and the players don't get a cent of it. So that's ultimately going to, the money is just too high for expansion not to happen. But me, when I look at this season, and we're not in the meeting, so we don't know exactly what the dialogue will be behind closed doors. But this season has raised so many issues domestically. This has not been a smooth sailing season for the NBA.
Agreed.
The season was like 2 days old when a sitting coach was placed on indefinite leave because he was part of a federal gambling probe.
Yeah.
We've had injury concerns throughout the season. The 65 game rule, everybody's pissed off about that because so many top contenders for the most significant individual awards in the league, these guys aren't eligible. So many guys are falling out of eligibility. Tanking. I mean, it has been a rough season on a lot of fronts. And so I'm just thinking, so with all these things that need to be fixed back home, the focus of this week's Board of Governors meeting is, hey, NBA Europe and then expansion the year after, NBA Europe in 2027-28, and then NBA expansion in 28-29. And it's like, don't we have to look inward first at some stuff before these huge undertakings? But I'm clearly in the minority on that one.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you is that's how I feel. It sounds like that's how you feel, but do you get that same sentiment when you talk to people around the league? Because that's how I mean, forget the problems of the league, tanking, which we'll talk about in a second, injuries, is the game being played too fast, guys can't even stay healthy. It's a real concern, and that's part of the looking inward. But opening 2 leagues in the same period of time, opening up the NBA Europe, which feels like there has a lot of momentum there, at the same time that you're expanding, that does feel like a lot of change. And then you just saw a new television deal. We've had TNT and ESPN forever. Now it's completely different how you watch the NBA. That's also a big change. So is there conversation around the league about, hey, there's a lot of things changing about our product right now. Are we sure this fast is appropriate?
Well, Adam Silver will have a press conference at some point in the coming week to sum up what was discussed at these Board of Governors meetings, and we'll see how revelatory that press conference actually is. But I would have to think that there are some owners that are going to be in that room saying, are we taking on too much? Are we trying to do too much? Because again, the expansion, look, everybody wants Seattle back in the league. There's been a lot of support for Vegas for a long time, although I think it is fair to raise the question, there's a slew of pro sports franchises in Vegas now. Can they really handle NBA, WNBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, and the NFL? Is Vegas big enough as a city to handle all of that? But ultimately, again, the expansion fees are so high that expansion is going to happen because, again, the money coming in is just too staggering. But NBA Europe, this is a league office initiative. This is something that means a lot to the league. But I'm sure there are some teams out there wondering, do we really need to invest in this? Is this a wise investment? Because, I made this point on Twitter a few days ago in an exchange with Bobby Marks from ESPN. When you add 2 teams and the NBA goes from 30 to 32 teams, with 2-way contracts, that's 575 players. 576 to be exact. But NBA Europe also has to have good players. Players who are on the borderline of being in the NBA. You need some of those guys going to NBA Europe too. Again, excuse me, I apologize to everyone for the for the
Yeah.
voice and the coughing, but like you're going to these cities, the basketball needs to be watchable for that business model to work. So,
Right.
I mean, I think there are a lot of questions, honestly.
Well, to me, we're looking at the game expanding globally, so it's a bigger pool of players that you're pulling from. I look around the league and I do think it's flush with talent. Like there are guys coming off the bench for top teams that I look at and I say, "Man, those are really good players. The league's in a really healthy spot." But expansion, I also balance that with the fact that we have at the moment 10 teams that are in a full out tank right now. A little bit of an abnormal year, but nonetheless, it still is a large number of teams that for at least 1/3 of the season are in open rebellion against winning. And now we're going to add 2 more teams and say, okay, is it still going to be competitive? But this does feel to me, all of these moves feel to me a little bit like an Adam Silver legacy play, bringing in new revenue with these new television deals, bringing in revenue with expansion. And so I almost wonder, do you get the sense that this is the tent pole or one of the tent pole things? And Adam Silver feels like this is my mark on the league. Europe, expansion, television, all this stuff coming in fast succession, in large part because it is his vision.
Well, there's no question he's been a huge proponent of NBA Europe. And, I want to make it clear. I think, you, both of us, me and you, I mean, are there many Americans who have anything to do with the NBA who would root? I mean, I feel like I would love NBA Europe as much as anybody you could think of who has anything to do with the NBA in the United States. I want it to work. I want it to flourish. I want it, but I'm just wondering, like, again, I spend so much time in England watching soccer, and I'm just trying to imagine NBA Europe franchises in London and Manchester that will essentially be expansion teams,
Right.
startup teams. It's different when you're talking about if Real Madrid and Barcelona move from the Euro League to NBA Europe, that's different. Those teams have a history. Those teams already have a fan base. Like they will obviously make the league, they bring instant credibility to an NBA Europe. But a big part of NBA Europe is being in cities that don't currently have basketball. And how is it going to work if the talent level isn't good? So I'm really curious to see how all this plays out. And, the way it's been laid out is NBA Europe is going to be first. Let's see if NBA Europe can really get off the ground by 27, 28. And if NBA expansion can really follow in 28, 29, maybe in both cases it requires an extra an extra year. But the point is the NBA is taking on 2 major, major, major initiatives that will require not just a lot of money, but a lot of effort and work to make these things happen. And again, it's just very interesting timing to me with so many things this season that we've been putting under the microscope and questioning, do they need to be fixed?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Well, let me ask you this. You said that this would be an initial vote, basically to explore Seattle and Las Vegas as expansion teams. What would the next steps be like? Are you looking for buyers, trying to get prospective buyers, arenas? Is there any conversation about relocation, perhaps, of already established teams and this or that? Like, what would the next steps be like if they vote this week and it's approved?
Committees will be formed and they'll dig into the specifics. But yeah, I mean, it's really identifying the groups that are going to bid for these, to own the teams in these cities. It was long assumed that LeBron James was going to be part of a Vegas group, and LeBron himself came out and said that that's not the case, that he has nothing to do with trying to get a team to Las Vegas. But like I said, this week's vote is more formality. But like I said, expansion's going to happen again because the money is just the numbers are just too rich for teams to pass up on. But again, this season, Adam Silver at All-Star basically promised that there would be tanking changes,
Yeah.
tanking reforms. What's that going to look like? The NBA has a lot to figure out.
Well, is there anything else that's going to be discussed this week at the Board of Governors meeting that is sort of front page? Like, what are the other topics on the agenda? I know it's 2 days, Tuesday and Wednesday, you said. So what else is on the agenda?
My sense is that expansion, NBA Europe, and tanking reform, those are going to be the three main areas of focus for this meeting. Because, again, the league has been pledging, even before All-Star, that they want to bring some level of reform to the draft and how the lottery works. And at All-Star, Adam Silver promised that by next season, there will be some level of change implemented. How drastic that change is remains to be seen. But that's a pretty busy agenda.
And just to be clear about this, the conversation is about Vegas and Seattle specifically. Does that mean all other markets are sort of off the table and it's like, hey, we want to expand, it's these two cities? There's not really an open conversation about any other market.
Exactly. At this point, those are the two cities that the NBA is lasered in on. You're exactly right.
Well, I think they're both good NBA cities, to be honest with you. You know, your concern about Las Vegas is an interesting one because it is a lot of teams now, but it seems like they can hold it between both the local crowd and just being a tourist, destination. Seattle, we all know, is a great NBA and basketball city, so I think, to me it makes sense. I'm rooting for those things, but I'm also rooting for the NBA to fix some of their issues that you had. Like you said, look internal, at least while, if not instead of, going out and expanding. Well, why don't we take a break here? On the other side, I want to talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are the hottest team in basketball once again. But there's a second hottest team in basketball that's pretty interesting, and that's the LA Lakers. We'll talk about that on the other side. What kind of dreams did you have when you were a kid? What did you want to be when you grew up? How about now? Are you thinking about starting your own business or side hustle? Shopify is the e-commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S. Shopify even powers the All City merch store. Shopify has got you covered with website creation, product description, email and social media marketing, and more. They also have AI tools designed to help you maximize sales. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into... with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/allcity. That's shopify.com/allcity. Also want to tell you guys about Underdog. The tournament is back. Upsets are inevitable. Underdog is the best place to get in on all of the action. Playing on Underdog is easy. Just pick whether your favorite players will go higher or lower on stats like points, rebounds, steals, and more. Get your picks right. You could win up to 5,000 times your cash. I stick to the NBA on Underdog, though. I'm going with Spurs at Heat Monday night. Bam Adebayo, 32.5 points and rebounds, lower. Tough matchup with Wemby. Norman Powell, 18.5 points, lower. Victor Wembanyama, this is how I'm feeling about Wemby right now. Victor Wembanyama, 29.5 points and assists. He might get that in points alone. I'm going higher. Download the app today. Use code ALLNBA to score $50 in bonus entries when you play your first $5. That's promo code ALLNBA. Underdog. Make picks. Win money. Must be 18 plus, 19 plus in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Arizona, Massachusetts, and Virginia, and present in the state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Concerned with your play? Call 1-800-MY-RESET or 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.ncpgambling.org. In Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP, 1-800-639-8783, or text NEXT STEP to 53342. In New York, call the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. Back here, also want to tell you guys about Underdog. Weekend edition of the All NBA show. I'm joined with Marc Stein, as I always am on the weekends, and there must be some conversation around the Lakers right now, who have won 9 in a row. Very convincing, by the way. Some of these very big wins as we get in the home stretch, and a lot of these Western Conference teams are battling with each other. They're not a lock to be the 3 seed, but they're pretty close. 2 games ahead of the Rockets, 3 games ahead of the Nuggets and Timberwolves. Very comfortable with just 11 games to go. So is there some conversation around the Lakers, around the NBA, rather, right now, Mark?
No question. And first, let me thank everyone. I greatly appreciate your patience putting up with the state of how I sound. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I will make it up to you the closer we get to the playoffs. But yeah, Luka Dončić was taking so much criticism just a couple of weeks ago when the Lakers were not on a 9-game winning streak. And I found all of it absolutely ridiculous. People forgetting the state of the 21-22 Mavericks roster that he took to the conference finals, and even the team he led to the finals that had no other current all-stars on it, and they beat 350-win teams in the playoffs, and somehow all of that was forgotten. This Laker team, they knew they were going to have issues this season with, they had very limited financial flexibility to do anything with the roster. If they finish with a 3rd seed, that is a massive achievement. And I just love the way Dončić took all the noise, didn't say anything, and just he's been the best player in the world during this 9-game winning streak, and has just played as well as he ever has. And it's been quite something to watch. And so that's why I wanted to go through this exercise with you to try to, pinpoint, the Thunder are trying to be the first repeat champions since the Warriors of 2017 and 2018.
Man.
And I think the Lakers, by virtue of this run they're on, have forced their way into that group that you have to say, I don't think anybody's going to want to see these guys in the playoffs. The way Luka is going right now, the way LeBron James seems to be embracing the most supplementary role of his career
by far,
they are not going to be a fun team to play. I mean, can they win the West? Realistically, probably not. But can they cause teams problems in the playoffs? I mean, you do not want to see Luka Dončić when he's playing like this.
You referenced it being a little silly, the critiques of him, or the doubt, I should say, not critiques, the doubt of Luka Dončić, but I'm not so sure they were. Luka had a tumultuous year between being traded and then, obviously some stuff in his personal life. And I thought it was pretty reasonable watching the struggles, the roster not being, perfectly ideal to his strengths. I think there was some question about, okay, maybe this is just a tough year for him and bounce back. I never thought he wasn't a great player, but maybe it was a tough year. That's part of what makes this turnaround so impressive. It really was only a handful of weeks ago. It was that. And to your point, he's looked like the best player in the world for 3 weeks now. So to me, I'm less offended by the doubt. All of the teams below San Antonio and Oklahoma City this year have taken turns looking good or terrible, including the Lakers. So for me, I don't find it quite as absurd.
Well, I just feel like this season should not be the referendum on his ability to lead a team, because this team has so many roster holes that Luka Dončić has nothing to do with. I mean, so that's the part that I'm not talking about. If you want to take issue with comportment with the officials, that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is, like, there was this conversation, like, the Lakers are disappointing and this is Luka's fault. And I'm like, what are you talking about? But again, like, I like that he didn't lash out or try to counter it with words. He countered it with the way he's playing, and he is playing like a monster. But look, I don't know. To me, any conversation, if we're going to talk about teams that could actually prevent OKC from repeating, I think that conversation has to start with San Antonio.
Agreed. I think it's clear. So that was your question you had, was teams that can beat Oklahoma City. And I do think Oklahoma City is a pretty heavy favorite. I think they're just a great team. They get J-Dub back. Health will be a bit of a question because of how banged up they've been, everybody in the NBA this year, including them. But I think they're overwhelming favorites. And in my opinion, San Antonio is by far the best challenger, not just because they've been the second best record in the West this year, but also that matchup. There's just something to that matchup that seems to give them problems. So if we were tiering this out, I actually think San Antonio is in its own tier of contenders to Oklahoma City specifically.
Totally agree. And I think Boston has become, this is something you hear when you talk to people around the league, that a lot of people think the Celtics can come out of the East now. Detroit obviously has lost Cade Cunningham indefinitely. Even with Cade Cunningham, they didn't have enough shooting. They were asking Cade to do so much. They lack experience. Like, even though the Pistons have led the East basically the whole season, there are still question marks about them. And without Cade, they're not even part of this discussion. So I do like the Celtics ahead of the Knicks. The Knicks have just been a little bit too up and down for me. But again, I think the most notable thing is that your Nuggets, we've always kept them there because as a hat tip to Jokic and how great he is and what we think this team can be when it is whole. And I think we finally saw that tonight. Like, are they going to be whole in the,
Finally.
you know, but I think this the Celtics, the Knicks, the Nuggets, the Lakers, those are the teams that would join the Spurs in that conversation.
So if I were to make my list, and I made my list, you kind of tasked me with it. I think San Antonio is number one. I still think Denver is an interesting matchup for them. And some of this has to do with their health. Like it depends a little bit. Hartenstein's been in and out. It depends a little bit on how healthy they are. But Denver does play a style that I think has just given them trouble. I know obviously OKC has owned them both in the playoffs last year and even this season, but the games are always competitive. And I think there is something there. I put the Celtics there as well at third. Some of this is, I think their odds of getting there are really good. So, but the matchup there is also kind of an interesting one. I had the Lakers fourth and the Wolves fifth. The Wolves are 2-2 against them this year, or they've gotten 2 wins off of them this year, which means something. They're too inconsistent, and I don't know if their offense is going to be capable, but they do have the physicality size to kind of match up with their physicality. So that part cancels out. The Lakers, I don't know if OKC is going to be able to guard Luka, which is huge, or LeBron James. Austin Reeves, I think they can slow down a little bit. I'm just not sure the Lakers are going to be able to guard them to the enough to be able to stay in those series. It's an interesting one. I could be wrong, and I think they play each other here in a week's time, and I'm very interested to see that game. But I'm not sure as great as the Lakers are. Lakers might knock off one of those teams I just mentioned, but I still just don't know if the Thunder are a great matchup or not for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, you said it well earlier. The Thunder and the Spurs have separated themselves from the rest of the West. You know, Lakers, Nuggets, Timberwolves, Rockets, none of them have been able to establish a consistency factor where you could really say, yes, they can come out of the West. I don't think anybody is really ready to go there. Whereas, San Antonio, I mean, it's still like you have to remember that the next minute Wemby plays in the playoffs will be his first playoff minute, but like they've been so good that you just throw that out, which you're not normally supposed to do in the NBA.
And maybe we look foolish, if they get in there and struggle, we'll look foolish and say, hey, historical precedent is that for a reason.
Maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me, but when the Nuggets recently lost to Memphis, didn't you declare yourself pretty much out on this season, and are you back in now?
No, I'm not back in. I mean, the Nuggets to me are they're scary. How long this has lingered for them, this sort of malaise that they've been in, dropping these games and fumbling. Even tonight they play Portland, they win by 20 points, but they give up 40 points in the first quarter. There's no intensity. So the Nuggets, no, I definitely do not put them in the same category as Oklahoma City or San Antonio. I think more recently the Lakers, but we'll have to, I still want to see how it plays out. The one team I am out on though, and I'm curious. They never get mentioned. Over the last month, they never get mentioned in these conversations, and that's Houston. Yeah. Denver, it's talked about hey, we know what they can do, and, even Minnesota to an extent. But Houston, I wonder, are people talking about Houston, or have a lot of people around the league written them off?
It was one thing when they didn't, they lost Fred VanVleet before the season started. But then they lost Steven Adams on top of it. And Steven Adams and the offensive rebound rate that they managed when Adams was playing seemingly offset the fact that they lost VanVleet and didn't have a true proven point guard to replace him. But they haven't been able to, now that without Adams and VanVleet, I mean, you're right. I don't hear execs, I don't hear scouts, I don't hear anybody that really that gives the Rockets a chance to make playoff noise, which is interesting, but it's their reality right now.
Well, it'll be interesting to see where the West shakes up. I mean, right now, Houston, Denver, Minnesota, you could throw those 3 teams in and shuffle them because I really don't know how that's going to shake up. They all have some challenging games ahead, and it might come down to seeding in a lot of different ways. The Lakers, I think, are the team that are comfortable there in that 3 seed, which is, I think, big for them, to be honest. And I would be very exciting to see their first round matchup if it's against Denver, Houston, or Minnesota. And if they make it that second round matchup against, you talk about the inexperience of Victor Wembanyama and the San Antonio Spurs in the playoffs. How about LeBron James with more playoff experience than anyone ever? It would be the ultimate contrast of experience versus non-experience that I think would just make for a great second round series. Any other parting thoughts here, Mark, or anything else going on in the league right now?
All I can say is I hope by next Sunday that I'm somewhat presentable, somewhat. Yeah. I feel like it's like I said, thank you to everyone for your patience and understanding.
Yeah. Cue that outro music there, Atticus. We appreciate everybody hanging out with us. I am back with Jason Timpf tomorrow. He's taking the Monday show. And I have Tim Legler Wednesday and Friday this week as he'll be on the road calling some of these games. It should be great. There are some good games in the middle part of this week, so I'm excited for the NBA to get some of these good matchups again. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you're subscribed and do us a favor. Hit that like button for us on the way out.
We all silly like the mayor.